He did not fall like a rock. He fell like someone who had already decided what he would not break. The sky above the forest tore open with a hard, bright line. It looked like a rip in glass. A wind that did not belong here shoved the trees. Leaves spun in circles. Birds fled. A man came through the tier. Blue suit, red cape, boots that caught the light for a second. He dropped fast, then slowed sharp, controlled like he grabbed the air with invisible hands. He turned his body in midair, eyes scanning, ears already listening. Superman hit the ground on one knee. The earth trembled. Dirt lifted in a ring. But it did not become a crater. He had taken the force and spread it out, like he was holding back a storm. He stayed there for half a second. He breathed in. The air smelled like pine and smoke. He heard it next. Not close, far. A scream. Another scream. Then the sound of wood snapping and fire chewing through a roof. He was gone. To the forest, it looked like a gust of wind. To the animals, it felt like thunder passing by. He arrived at the edge of a village in a blink. Small houses, dirt roads, a well, people running with buckets, flames climbing up walls. Armored men were inside the village. They moved with purpose. Not bandits. Not scared. They were doing this like it was a plan. One raised a sword at a farmer. Another dragged a woman by the arm. A third threw a torch at a roof and smiled when it caught. Superman stepped between the sword and the farmer. The blade hit his chest and stopped like it had struck steel. The armored man froze. His eyes went wide behind his helmet. Superman did not look angry. He looked focused. "No," he said, calm and firm. "Put it down." The man swung again, harder. Superman caught the sword with 2 fingers and bent it into a tight curve. He let the metal fall. It hit the dirt with a dull clank. 2 more armored men rushed him from both sides. Superman moved once. Not a punch. Not a kick. He took 2 steps and tapped both of them on the shoulder. The taps were gentle, but the force behind them was not. Both men spun, lost their balance, and landed in the dirt like sacks. A spell cracked through the air. A bright bolt of light slammed into Superman's back. It did not burn like fire. It felt wrong, like pain that came from inside his bones, not on his skin. He turned his head slowly toward the caster. A robed figure stood near the well, hands raised, mouth moving in sharp words. A second bolt formed. Magic, Superman thought, and the word carried weight. He did not panic, but his mind filed it away fast. The second bolt fired. Superman blurred sideways. The bolt struck a wooden post instead. The post exploded into splinters. Superman was already there, beside the robed figure. He held the caster's wrist before the hands could make the next shape. The caster tried to pull away. The caster's eyes were full of fear now, not anger. Fear. Superman lowered his voice. "You're hurting people," he said. "Stop." The caster spat another word. A thin chain of light snapped into the air and wrapped around Superman's arm. This time he felt it. The chain squeezed with a pressure that did not care how strong his muscles were. It was not a normal rope. It was a rule. Superman clenched his fist and pulled. The chain stretched, shimmered, and then shattered like glass. The caster stumbled backward. The spell died in his throat. Superman did not chase him. He looked past him, across the village, and saw the real danger. A roof beam was collapsing. A child was trapped under it. Superman was there before the beam finished falling. He lifted it with one hand, like it weighed nothing. With the other hand, he scooped the child up and set her on her feet. Her face was black with smoke. Her eyes were huge. She stared at him like she was seeing a story come to life. He gave her a small nod. "You're okay." Then he turned, inhaled, and blew out a cold breath. The flames on the roof shuddered. Frost spread across burning wood. Smoke turned thin. Fire died. People stopped running. They stared. Some fell to their knees. Someone whispered a word that sounded like angel, but it was not English. Superman looked at the village and at the armored men still standing, frozen in shock. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Nobody else gets hurt," he said. "Drop your weapons. Walk away." A few obeyed without thinking. A few tried to run. Superman moved. He did not strike. He placed himself in their path again and again, like the village had an invisible wall made of blue and red. When the last armored man realized he could not escape, he did the worst thing. He grabbed a villager and pressed a knife to the man's throat. Superman stopped. For a second, the whole village held its breath. The armored man shouted, voice shaking, "Stay back." Superman's eyes narrowed, not with rage, with careful attention. He could hear the villager's heartbeat, too fast. He could hear the armored man's breathing, broken. He could see the knife's edge tremble. Superman lifted both hands, open palms. "Okay," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." His voice was steady. The armored man's was not. "I don't know who you are," Superman continued, slow and clear. "But this ends now. Let him go." The man's grip tightened. Superman did not move forward. He moved sideways so fast the air snapped, then stopped behind the armored man. He took the knife with 2 fingers and pulled it away like a toy. He put the knife on the ground. Then he gently lifted the armored man by the collar and set him down in the dirt. The hostage stumbled away, shaking, alive. Silence. Superman looked around at the faces. Fear, awe, confusion, hope trying to rise and not sure if it was allowed. He swallowed. He had saved people before, thousands of times, but this place felt different. It felt like fear was the normal air here. He took a step toward the nearest villager who looked like a leader, a man holding a pitchfork with white knuckles. Superman softened his expression. "My name is Clark," he said. "I need to ask, where am I?" The villager stared like the question was a trick. Before anyone could answer, Superman's hearing caught a sound that did not belong. Not in the village. Far away. A deep hum, like a giant machine turning. And for a moment, he felt something else too. Eyes. Not the eyes of villagers. Eyes that were not here, but were watching anyway. Deep under the earth, in a place built like a kingdom inside a tomb, a mirror of black glass shimmered. Ainzu Al-Gaun sat on a throne that looked too large for any normal person. His body was bone and gold and crimson cloth, but the mind inside him was sharp and restless. On the mirror, a scene played. A man in blue and red, a cape, flight, impossible speed, strength that made armed soldiers look like children. And then something more important than the power. The man had not killed. Ainz's empty eye sockets did not blink, but his attention sharpened. That restraint, he thought, that choice, not a monster. Then he remembered his world, his new world. Here, power always came with hunger. Or, he thought, he is hiding it. Albedo stood at his side, tall and perfect, her wings folded like a threat held back by loyalty. Her eyes were wide with something close to anger. "Ainzama," she said, voice tight. "This being is an unknown variable. We should remove it." Across the room, Demiurge smiled. His glasses caught the light. "Or," Demiurge said, "we should understand it." Ainz's bony fingers tapped the arm of his throne. He felt the old fear in his chest, his human fear, still trapped in a body that could not sweat. A player? Another one? But the mirror showed no spellcasting, no visible magic. Only raw physical power that mocked every human limit. Ainz spoke aloud, voice deep and calm, the voice of a ruler who never doubted. "Do not engage," he ordered. "Not yet." Albedo stiffened. Demiurge's smile widened, pleased like a student hearing a correct answer. Ainz continued. "Observe, gather information. Send someone who can approach without provoking hostility." Sebastian, standing quietly at the edge of the room, bowed. "As you command," Sebas said. Ainz watched the mirror again. The man in blue had just asked a question. "Where am I?" Ainz leaned forward slightly. That power, he thought. It does not fit this world. Then a colder thought followed. And now, he thought, everyone will come running. Clark stayed in the village until the fires were out and the wounded were safe. He moved through the streets with careful steps, as if his size might break the ground. He carried buckets of water without spilling a drop. He lifted broken beams off trapped animals. He set shattered doors back on their hinges like he was doing simple housework. The villagers watched him like he might vanish if they blinked. Some were brave enough to talk, most were not. One elderly woman finally approached with a cloth and tried to wipe ash off his sleeve. Clark stepped back at first out of habit, then let her. "Thank you," he said. She pointed at his chest symbol, the bright S, and said a word that meant nothing to him. Clark tried the same word back, clumsy. The woman smiled, surprised. Then she spoke slower. Clark listened. He did not understand every word, but he understood enough. They were afraid of the armored men. They were used to fear. He asked for names. He asked when the attack started. He asked where the attackers came from. People answered, but not in the clean way he wanted. "It was sudden," one man said. "Like bad weather." "They came from the road," another said. "Like wolves." Clark frowned. He kept his voice gentle. "Did anyone see their faces?" he asked. Blank stares. "Did they have a leader?" he asked. A woman pointed at the robed caster, now tied up and watched by 3 villagers with trembling hands. Clark walked to the caster and knelt. The caster glared. Clark spoke slowly, trying to pick words from the village speech. "Why? Attack." The caster spat to the side. Clark sighed. He glanced around. "Do you have a place where you keep records?" he asked the villagers. "Like a list? Names? A notice board? Anything official?" The villagers stared again. "A record?" the pitchfork man repeated, like Clark had asked for a dragon egg. Clark blinked. "You know, paper, reports, information." The elderly woman laughed softly, like the idea itself was cute. "We have stories," she said, halting, "and fear." Clark rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay," he muttered to himself. "We start with stories." That night, he did not sleep. He sat outside a half-burnt house with his cape wrapped around a child like a blanket. The child had refused to go inside. The smell of smoke made her cry. Clark listened to her breathing slow down. He looked up at the stars. They were wrong. Not his sky, not his world. But they were still stars. He could feel the sun's energy in his cells, faint but present. Whatever sun this world had, it fed him. He was not powerless here. That was good. That was also dangerous. Because if he was this strong here, then what kind of things could be strong here too? A man approached from the dark. Tall, broad shoulders, calm steps, hands open and empty. Clark heard him from far away. His heartbeat was steady. His breathing was trained. Not a thief. The man stopped at a respectful distance. "Good evening," the man said, using the local language in a clean, careful way. Clark stood. Not fast. Not threatening. "Evening," Clark answered, using the same language in the simplest form he could manage. The man's eyes flicked over Clark's suit, cape, and face. He did not show fear. He showed curiosity held under control. "My name is Sebas," the man said. "I am traveling." Clark watched him closely. Traveling, he thought. Sure. But Sebas looked like someone who could break stone with his hands and still hold a teacup without shaking. Clark nodded. "Clark." Sebas bowed slightly. "Clark Dono, you saved many lives today." Clark looked back toward the village. "I did what anyone should do." Sebas's face did not change, but his eyes warmed a little. "In this world," Sebas said softly, "not everyone agrees with that." Clark met his gaze. "Then this world needs people who do." A small silence passed between them. Not uncomfortable, just careful. Sebas spoke again. "You asked where you are. This village is called Carne Village. The nearest large city is Rantel." Clark tried the name in his head. Rantel. "I need to get to a place with answers," Clark said. "I need to understand what's happening here." Sebas nodded. "Many will ask questions about you as well." Clark's jaw tightened slightly. He had felt it already. The Watchers, the fear. "I'm not here to take over," Clark said plainly. "I'm not here to be worshipped. I'm here because I landed here." Sebas studied him. "You do not know how you arrived." Clark shook his head. "1 second I was." He stopped himself. He did not want to talk about his world to a stranger. Not yet. 1 second I was somewhere else, he finished, and then I was in the sky. Sebas accepted that without pushing. Then, Sebas said, perhaps we should walk together to Erantal. The road can be dangerous. Clark almost smiled. He could cross the continent in minutes. Roads did not scare him. But people did. Not because they could hurt him, because they could be hurt by him, or by the fear he caused. And because he needed to learn their world the slow way, the human way. Okay, Clark said. We'll walk. For a while. Sebas's eyes flicked to the child sleeping under Clark's cape. You protect even when you rest, Sebas said. Clark looked at the child. Someone has to. Far away, in a bright, clean room where holy symbols covered the walls, old men listened to reports with tight mouths. The report was messy. It was rushed. It was scared. A man in blue. He flew. He stopped an attack. He broke spells with his hands. He did not kill. One of the leaders, a cardinal of the slain theocracy, leaned forward. Impossible, he whispered. Another slammed a fist on the table. If he is real, then he is either a gift or a disaster. A third spoke in a cold voice. If he is not under our control, he will become a threat to humanity. A silence settled, heavy. Then the most dangerous words in the room were spoken. Send the black scripture, the leader said. The others nodded. Because fear made them brave in the worst way. The road to Erantal showed Clark the world's habits. He saw a merchant wagon pass by with guards who looked nervous even in daylight. He heard them talk about monsters like monsters were rain, something that might fall any day. He saw small shrines with offerings, but not the kind of hope he knew. These shrines felt like deals made with the sky. And he saw how people looked at Sebas, not with love, with caution. Like they sensed Sebas was not just a traveler. Clark tested little things, the way he always did when he tried to understand a place. He asked a farmer, "Who is in charge around here?" The farmer shrugged. "Lords, kings, whoever has soldiers." He asked a guard, "Is there a law, a court?" The guard blinked. "A what?" Clark sighed so quietly only he could hear it. He asked Sebas later, "If someone attacks a village, who investigates?" Sebas's answer was gentle and honest. "Often, no one. Unless someone important cares." Clark's hands tightened at his sides. That answer made his stomach feel heavy. He kept walking. At night, he tried again with a different question. "Do you have newspapers?" Clark asked a group of travelers around a fire. They stared. Clark tried to explain. "Paper with news. Public information." One man laughed. "The news is whatever the Lord says it is." Clark looked at the flames and thought, "That's not news. That's control." He caught himself frowning and forced his face to relax. He could not fix everything on day one. He needed a foothold. He needed facts. He almost smiled at himself, sources. The next day, they reached Erantal. The city rose from the plain with stone walls and busy gates. People moved in lines. Traders called out. Guards watched every face. Clark stepped through the gate beside Sebas and felt dozens of eyes touch him. Not because he looked poor, not because he looked rich, because he looked impossible. His suit was clean and strange. His cape was bright. His posture was calm. He looked like a hero in a world that did not trust heroes. Clark kept his chin up. He didn't try to hide. But he also didn't fly. Not yet. He and Sebas found an inn. Clark paid with coins Sebas provided. Clark disliked it right away. "Let me earn it," Clark said. Sebas answered simply, "You already have. You saved lives." Clark did not argue more. He filed it away. He would pay it back. Later. He went out into the city, alone for a while, with Sebas watching from a distance. Clark tried to listen. He heard talk about the angel in the countryside. He heard fear from guards. He heard excitement from children. He heard something else that made his skin prickle. A group in a side street spoke in a careful, coded way. "Tonight," one said. "At the square." "Are you sure?" another asked. "He might be there." "That's the point," the first said. Clark's eyes narrowed. He turned and walked toward the main square. The square was full. Not because of a festival, because something was wrong. A crowd had gathered around a stone fountain. People were pushing back, leaving a wide circle like they were afraid the ground would bite them. In the center stood a creature that looked like a nightmare made real. Tall, gray skin, horns, a mouth full of sharp teeth. It held a chain in one clawed hand. At the end of the chain was a screaming young man on his knees. The demon, because that is what everyone was calling it, laughed. It spoke in a harsh voice that made the air feel dirty. "Who will stop me?" Guards stood at the edge of the circle, shaking. Their spears were steady only because their fear locked their arms. Clark stepped forward. The crowd gasped as if the air had been pulled out of the square. He heard whispers. "Blue Angel. Cape Man. He's here." The demon's eyes landed on Clark and widened with a sharp, hungry interest. "Oh," it said, grin stretching. "You." Clark's voice was calm. "Let him go." The demon yanked the chain. The young man cried out. Clark did not move closer. He scanned. He listened. He heard more than the demon. He heard heartbeats on rooftops. Too steady. Too trained. He heard boots on stone behind the crowd, not guards. He heard someone whisper a spell under their breath, not in the city's language. This was a setup. Clark took one more step. The demon lunged. Clark moved faster than the crowd could see. He grabbed the chain, snapped it with one pull, and caught the falling hostage before the man hit the ground. He set the man behind him and said, "Run." The demon swung a claw. Clark blocked it with his forearm. The impact cracked the stone under his feet, but Clark did not slide back. He pushed. The demon flew across the square and slammed into a wall. The crowd screamed and scattered. Clark did not chase the demon. He looked up at the rooftops. "Show yourselves," he said. Black-clad figures stepped into view. Not normal soldiers. They moved like knives, quiet and sure. One stood at the front, wearing a mask that hid most of the face. The eyes were hard and bright. The leader's voice was cold. "You will come with us." Clark felt his patience tighten. "I'm not your prisoner," he said. The leader raised a hand. A spell circle flared in the air, bright and clean like a symbol carved from light. Chains snapped out of it. Not iron. Magic. They wrapped around Clark's arms and chest, tightening like a vice. Clark's muscles tensed. This hurt. Not like a punch. Like his body was being told, "You cannot move." For the first time since he arrived, Clark's breath caught. The leader's eyes narrowed. "It works." Clark pulled. The chains held. He could break steel. He could lift buildings. He could stop meteors. But magic did not play by those rules. Clark looked at the crowd. People were still in the square, trapped by panic. If he fought full force right now, he could hurt them by accident. He stopped pulling. He lowered his shoulders. He relaxed just enough to think. The black-clad fighters rushed in from three sides, blades drawn, each one aiming for joints, eyes, and places that might matter. Clark moved with the chains still on him. He twisted, stepped, and turned his body in tight angles, so attacks slid off his suit or struck harmless spots. A blade scraped his cheek. It drew a thin line of blood. The crowd saw it. The crowd gasped louder than when he threw the demon. Because now the angel could bleed. Clark's eyes flicked to the leader again. So this is their plan, he thought. Bind me. Show the world I'm not untouchable. Take me. Clark inhaled slowly. He closed his eyes for half a second and listened. He found the spell's shape. Not like he understood magic, but like he understood pressure. The chains were connected to the glowing circle. The circle was being fed by a small object in the leader's hand. A focus. A tool. Clark opened his eyes. He moved like lightning. The crowd did not see him cross the distance. They saw him in one place, then another. He grabbed the leader's wrist, careful not to crush bones, and turned the hand so the object faced away from him. The chain slackened for 1 second. Clark used that 1 second. He tore free. The chains shattered into bright dust. The leader stumbled back, shocked for the first time. Clark did not hit him. Clark reached and took the object out of the leader's hand. It was small, like a charm, like a carved token. It felt cold. Clark stared at it and felt that wrong pressure again. He set it gently on the ground, like it was a live wire. "I'm not here to fight you," Clark said to the leader, "but I won't be taken." The black-clad fighters adjusted instantly, spreading out, creating angles, trying to force Clark to move where they wanted. Smart. Trained. Clark respected that. He also saw what they were willing to do. One fighter leaped toward a fleeing woman, grabbing her to use as a shield. Clark's eyes hardened. He vanished and reappeared beside the woman. He lifted her away and set her behind him without even looking at her. Then he looked at the fighter. "No," he said, voice sharper now. "Not like that." The fighter attacked anyway. Clark tapped the fighter's shoulder with a quick, controlled hit. The fighter flew backward and skidded across stone, unconscious but alive. The demon roared from the wall and charged back into the square, angry and reckless. Clark turned and met it. He caught the demon's claws in both hands. The impact shook the fountain. Clark pushed the demon down, pinning it to the ground. He leaned closer, voice low. "You don't get to scare people." The demon snarled and spat a spell word. A burst of dark heat slammed into Clark's face. Pain flared, sharp and sudden. Clark grunted. The crowd heard it. They heard him make a sound of real strain. Clark's eyes narrowed, but he did not back away. He grabbed the demon by the horns and lifted. He flew straight up. The demon screamed, clawing the air. Clark shot into the sky like an arrow, high enough that the city became a map below. Then he stopped, held the demon in front of him, and looked it in the eyes. "This ends," he said. He threw the demon far, far away, out past the city walls, into empty fields where no one would be hit. He returned in a blink. The black-clad fighters were already retreating, not running in fear, pulling back in order. The leader glared at Clark like a man who had just learned a new problem existed. "You are not human," the leader said. Clark stood in the square, cape settling behind him. "I'm a person," Clark answered, "and you just tried to kidnap me in the middle of a city." The leader lifted a hand, and a faint glow formed like a signal. A second later, the black-clad group vanished. Teleportation. Clark turned his head quickly, scanning the rooftops, the alleys, the gates. They were gone. The crowd slowly crept back, staring at him like he was both protector and storm. Clark looked down at the thin blood on his fingers from his cheek. Magic. He understood the truth now, clear and simple. In this world, he could not rely on strength alone, and someone had just announced him to every power that mattered. Far away, deep under the earth, Einzoll Gaun watched through a mirror. His mind raced, but his voice stayed calm. So, he thought, he bleeds, and he still refuses to kill. Demiurge's smile widened in quiet delight. Albedo's eyes sharpened into a dangerous focus. And in the streets of Erantel, Clark Kent stood under a sky that was not his, feeling the weight of a new kind of war. Not one of fists. One of fear, plans, and people caught in between. The city square looked normal again by morning. The fountain was still there. The stalls were back. People pretended they had things to do. But their voices were different. They spoke softer. They looked up more often. They kept pointing at the sky like it might open again. Clark walked through Erantel with his cape hidden under a plain cloak Sebas had found. The cloak did not make him invisible. It only made him look slightly less impossible. It did not help much. People still stared. They had seen him lift a demon and throw it out of the city like it was a sack of grain. They had seen him bleed when the chains of light wrapped him. And they had seen the black-clad fighters vanish like ghosts. Fear loved that kind of story. Fear also spread it fast. Clark stopped near a wall where notices were pinned. He leaned in, hoping for something like a report, a public message, a list of crimes, anything official. Most of the paper was simple. Lost items, wanted posters, a warning about wolves on the road. Clark frowned. He found nothing about the demon. Nothing about the kidnapping attempt. Nothing about the magic chains. A guard noticed him reading and stepped closer, hand resting on a spear. "You," the guard said carefully. Clark turned and kept his face calm. "Morning." The guard looked him over, eyes moving from Clark's shoulders to his boots. "You're the one from the square," the guard said. "I helped," Clark replied. The guard swallowed. "The captain wants to speak with you." Clark nodded once. "Okay, where?" The guard hesitated, then pointed. "Barracks, near the east gate." Clark followed, not because he liked being summoned, but because he needed something this city did not want to give. Facts. Inside the barracks, the captain was a hard-looking man with tired eyes. He held himself like someone who had seen death often and had learned not to flinch. He did not offer a chair. He did not smile. "You caused a panic," the captain said. Clark kept his voice level. "A demon caused a panic. I stopped it." The captain's jaw tightened. "You also made it clear you can bleed." Clark's eyes sharpened slightly. "That wasn't my choice." The captain leaned forward. "Who were those fighters?" "I don't know," Clark said. The captain's eyes narrowed, like he did not believe that was possible. Clark spread his hands a little. "I'm telling the truth. They were trained. They had magic tools. They tried to take me." The captain stared, then looked away like he was thinking. "You're not from any kingdom I know," he said. "Your clothes are strange. Your words are strange. You say your name is Clark. Are you a noble? A monster? A summoned being?" "I'm a person," Clark said, "and I'm trying to understand your world." The captain let out a short breath that was almost a laugh. "Understand it," he repeated. "Then understand this. People here don't like unknown powers. Unknown powers become wars." Clark's face stayed calm, but something in his chest tightened. "That's why I'm asking questions," he said. "Who investigates attacks? Who keeps records? Who tracks groups like those fighters?" The captain stared at him like Clark had asked why the sky was blue. "We have soldiers," the captain said. "We have lords, and we have the Adventurers Guild when things get too big. That's it." Clark nodded slowly. "Then I want to speak to the guild." The captain's eyes flicked to the door. "You can try, but don't expect answers. Nobody wants to be the first to point a finger at something they can't handle." Clark left the barracks with that heavy feeling still in him. He could hear the city, hear every cartwheel, every argument, every whispered rumor that used his face as a scary story. He walked faster, not with super speed, but with purpose. At the Adventurers Guild, the building was loud. People bragged, people complained. People laughed too hard because laughing was better than thinking about what was outside the walls. The clerk behind the counter froze when he saw Clark. The room went quiet in waves, like a pond when a stone hits it. Clark kept his hands visible. He lowered his voice so it would not carry like a command. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "I'm here to ask about yesterday." A few adventurers backed away anyway. A tall woman with a staff stared at him from the side. Her eyes were sharp, like she was measuring him with more than sight. Clark felt it, a pressure in the air, like someone's magic was touching his skin without touching him. He glanced at her. She did not blink. He turned back to the clerk. "Who can I speak to?" The clerk swallowed. "The guildmaster is busy." "Then I'll wait," Clark said. He stepped aside and stood near the wall like he was just another traveler. That was when he noticed the running gag coming back to bite him. A group of adventurers argued near a notice board. "One of us should write it down," a man said. "A report," another snorted. "Write it down? For who? For what? The noble will just say we lied." Clark couldn't stop himself. He stepped closer. "If you don't write it down," he said, "how does anyone learn the truth?" They stared at him. The man blinked. "Truth doesn't feed you." Clark paused. "It can." The man laughed once, nervous. "Not here." Clark took that in like a punch he couldn't block. He looked around the guild. People were brave, but not hopeful. They were used to surviving, not changing things. He heard a soft step behind him. Seba's. Seba spoke quietly, close enough that only Clark could hear. "You are trying to build a world you recognize." Clark's mouth tightened. "I'm trying to stop people from being hunted." Sebas nodded. That is more dangerous here than you think." Before Clark could answer, the guildmaster appeared. He was older, heavy in the shoulders, and looked like someone who had learned how to say no without raising his voice. "You," the guildmaster said, pointing at Clark. "Come." They went into a back room. The guildmaster shut the door and sighed. "I don't know what you are," he said, "but the city is buzzing. Nobles are nervous. Soldiers are angry. Adventurers are frightened. And someone is already selling little wooden charms with a red cape carved on them." Clark blinked. "Already?" The guildmaster shrugged. "People make money from fear." Clark forced himself to stay calm. "I want information about the demon, about the fighters who tried to capture me." The guildmaster sat down hard. "Demon first. That demon was not normal. That wasn't some wandering beast. That looked like a plan." "Yes," Clark said. The guildmaster's eyes sharpened. "And the fighters? Black clothes, masked, perfect steps." Clark nodded. The guildmaster's mouth went thin. "I've heard rumors. Holy assassins, people from across the sea, people who think they own the right to decide who lives." Clark held still. "Do you know their name?" The guildmaster hesitated, then spoke like the word tasted bitter. "The slain theocracy." Clark repeated it carefully so he would remember. "Why would they want me?" Clark asked. The guildmaster spread his hands. "Why does anyone want power? To use it, or to destroy it so no one else can?" Clark's eyes hardened. "I won't be used." The guildmaster stared at him. "Then you'd better learn to spot traps." Clark nodded once. "Tell me about demons." The guildmaster leaned back, thinking, "Demons don't show up in city squares for fun. Not like that. Somebody made it happen. Somebody opened the door." Clark's stomach sank. "Summoning." The guildmaster blinked. "You know that word?" "I know enough," Clark said, and it was true. He had seen magic before, but not like this, not in a place where it was part of daily control. The guildmaster lowered his voice. "If this is what I think it is, someone is testing you." Clark stared at the wooden table and felt the shape of the problem. He could punch a demon into the ground. He could throw it into the clouds. But he couldn't punch a plan, not without finding the person holding it. Across the world, in a bright sacred hall, the slain theocracy argued in quiet fury. A masked warrior knelt on the floor. Black scripture, one of the best. A cardinal paced. "You failed to capture him." The warrior's voice was controlled. The binding worked. For a moment, he escaped by targeting the focus. He moves too fast. The cardinal's face tightened. He bled. "Yes," the warrior said. "Magic affects him." The room shifted. That one fact changed everything. Another leader leaned in, eyes cold. "Then he can be controlled." The warrior did not answer that. The cardinal stopped pacing. "What does he call himself?" "He said Clark." The warrior replied. "The crowd calls him Angel." The cardinal's lip curled. "Angel. If he is an outsider, he is a threat. If he is a monster in a man's shape, he is a threat. If he is a weapon no one can hold, he is a threat." He looked at the kneeling warrior. "Do it again," the cardinal said. "But smarter. No public square, no witnesses." The warrior lifted his head slightly. "Understood." The cardinal added almost to himself, "And if we cannot hold him." He let the sentence hang. Everyone understood the end of it. Deep underground, Ains sat with his guardians and listened to reports like he was listening to a battlefield. But this battlefield was information. Demiurge spoke first, voice smooth. He is extremely strong physically. He also shows restraint. He avoids killing even when pressured. Albedo's wings flexed once, sharp with annoyance. Restraint can be an act. Sebas's voice stayed calm. "I met him. He saved children. He stayed to rebuild." Albedo turned her eyes toward Sebas. "And if he decides to rebuild the world around Nazarick?" Sebas did not flinch. He does not speak like a conqueror. Ains lifted a hand, and the room stilled. He felt that old fear again. The fear of another being with power that could erase everything he built. But he also felt something else. Curiosity. "He is not like the others," Ains said. Demiurge's smile returned. "Exactly. which makes him valuable. Albedo's voice sharpened. Or dangerous. Ainz tapped the throne arm once. Observe, he said. Do not provoke. Learn his weakness. Learn his limits. Learn his morals. Demiurge bowed. As you command. Albedo bowed, but her eyes stayed hot. Ainz-sama, give me permission to act if he approaches Nazareth. Ainz hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he spoke with authority. Only if he becomes a direct threat, not because you dislike him. Albedo's lips pressed together. Understood. After the meeting, Ainz stayed alone with the mirror. On it, Clark walked through a market with a cloak around his shoulders, looking like a man trying to pretend he did not shake the world. Ainz's mind raced. If he was a player, why no YGG Dracal signs? If he was not, then what was he? Ainz leaned back. He is building trust, Ainz thought. That is a kind of power, too. Then he remembered the demon in the square. That demon was not random, he thought. That was bait. Ainz's empty sockets narrowed, as if he could squint. Someone is playing games, he thought. And they are using him as the board. Clark did not sleep much. He walked rooftops at night, not to spy for fun, but to listen for danger. He heard thieves. He heard lovers. He heard guards complaining about pay. He also heard something else. Twice. A whisper of spell words. Quick. Hidden. Then gone. He followed once and found nothing. No footprints. No bodies. No clues. The second time, he followed farther, to the edge of the city. He found a cart track in the mud. Heavy. Recent. He crouched, touched the ground, and listened with his senses like a detective. He could hear distant wheels. A cart moving now, not long ago. He could also smell something faint on the wind. Blood. Not fresh battle blood. Old, dried blood. Like fear had been carried on it. Clark's eyes hardened. He did not fly. He ran fast enough that no one saw him, slow enough that the air did not scream. Outside the walls, the road was quiet. The cart was ahead, hidden by trees. Clark slowed and watched. A covered wagon. Guards with clubs and short swords. Not soldiers. Hired muscle. And inside the wagon, heartbeats. Many. Small. Panicked. Clark's hand tightened. Slaves, he thought. He moved. The guards barely had time to shout before Clark was among them. He disarmed them without breaking bones. He snapped clubs, bent blades, knocked men down with precise taps. One guard tried to run. Clark was there, blocking the road. Where are you taking them? Clark asked, voice flat. The guard's eyes shook. I don't know. We just deliver. Clark's patience thinned. Deliver to who? The guard's lip quivered. A house. A noble house. In the capital. We get paid. That's all. Clark looked at the wagon. A child whimpered inside. That sound made Clark's choices easy. He tore the wagon door open gently. Inside, people were tied, packed tight, eyes wide. A woman flinched away from him, then froze when she saw the cloak and the red edge of his cape. Don't be scared, Clark said, soft again. I'm here to help. He ripped ropes like they were string. He carried the weakest out first. He set them on the grass. He checked for injuries. As he worked, he felt a familiar frustration rise. He could stop this cart. But how many carts were there? How many houses? How many nobles? This was what the guildmaster meant. Systems, not monsters. Clark stood and looked at the guards lying in the dirt, groaning. He could take them to the city. He could hand them to soldiers. Would it change anything? He didn't know. But he knew one thing. He couldn't ignore it. He turned to the freed captives. Can you walk? He asked. A man nodded, eyes wet. Yes. Clark pointed back toward the distant city lights. Go there. Find the Adventurers Guild. Tell them what happened. Tell them your names. Tell them everything. They stared at him like they didn't believe anyone would listen. Clark swallowed. I will make them listen, he said. That was the moment the trap chose to spring. A circle of light flashed in the trees. Clark felt it before he saw it. That wrong pressure again. Magic. Shapes in the dark moved. Not guards. Not nobles. Something else. Someone had been waiting for him to do exactly this. Days passed, and the city did not calm down. Clark became a rumor that walked. Some people called him hero. Some called him disaster. Some called him a sign that the end was coming. Clark kept moving anyway. He went to small villages. He helped rebuild. He stopped wolves that were bigger than wolves should be. He carried sick people to healers. He did not ask for thanks. He asked for names. He asked for dates. He asked again and again. Who did this? Most people didn't know. But patterns began to form. A whisper about a noble network that sold people. A whisper about demons appearing where fear was thickest. A whisper about a hidden kingdom of monsters under the earth. Clark listened, and he wrote what he learned on paper at night, with a borrowed quill. It felt almost silly, but it also felt right. If the world had no daily planet, then he would build the idea of one in his own hands. He would make truth harder to erase. Sebes traveled with him for a while, always a step behind, always polite. Clark did not trust him fully, but he trusted Sebas's actions. Sebes saved a child from a river without asking. Sebes returned stolen coins to a crying old man. Sebes spoke to villagers with respect, not pity. One evening, under a tree line, Clark asked the question that had been pressing on him. "Why are you really here?" Clark said. Sebes looked at him with calm honesty. "Because I was told to observe you." Clark stared. Told by who? Sebes did not answer that. He did not lie. He simply held silence. Clark nodded slowly. "So you have a master?" "Yes," Sebes said. Clark's eyes narrowed, but his voice stayed calm. "Is your master the one sending demons into city squares?" Sebas's gaze sharpened. "No." Clark studied him for a long moment. He could hear Sebas's heartbeat. Steady. No spikes. No panic. Sebes believed what he said. Clark looked away, thinking. "Then someone else is moving pieces," Clark said. Sebes nodded once. "Yes." Clark's jaw tightened. "Then I'm going to find them." Sebas's voice was quiet. "And if the ones you find are not human," Clark looked at him, "then they still answer for what they do." In a palace far away, Princess Renner read reports with a gentle smile on her face. Her eyes were warm. Her mind was not. "A man in blue," she murmured, turning a page. "Strength beyond reason, mercy beyond sense." A maid asked softly, "Is he a threat, Princess?" Renner tilted her head like she was considering a child's question. "He is a change," she said, "and change is dangerous." She tapped the paper. "He creates hope," she added, still smiling. "Hope makes people disobey." Her maid shivered. "What should we do?" Renner's smile did not fade. "We watch," she said, "and we let other people panic first." The side path that became Act 4 started with something small. A single missing caravan. Clark heard about it from a crying father on a road. "My son went with them," the father begged. "They were supposed to bring grain. They never came back." Clark could have flown up and searched the whole region in minutes. But he didn't. Not at first. Because last time he drew attention in the sky, an entire faction tried to chain him like an animal. So he did it the hard way. He asked questions. He listened for wheels at night. He followed the smell of sweat and fear on the wind. And then, one afternoon, he heard screaming in a ravine. Clark reached it in a heartbeat. A caravan had been attacked. Wagons broken, horses dead. And standing over the survivors, a tall figure in a mask, with a grin carved into it like a joke. The air around the figure felt wrong, like heat that came from the world itself. Demons. Not just one. Several. And between them, tied to a wagon, were people families held like bait. Clark stopped at the edge of the ravine. He didn't step in. Not yet. He looked at the demons, then at the captives, then at the surrounding cliffs. He listened. Heartbeats. More than the captives. Hidden ones. On the ridge, behind rocks, watching. Clark's mouth went thin. A test again. The masked figure spread its arms wide like it was on a stage. "Ah," it said, voice loud and pleased. "The flying man." Clark's eyes hardened. "Let them go." The figure chuckled. "You say that every time." Clark took one step forward. "Because it's always true." The figure tilted its head, and yet the world stays the same. Clark said nothing. He didn't waste breath on a speech. He moved. He vanished from the ravine's edge and appeared beside the captives. He snapped the ropes in a second, scooped up the smallest child, and launched upward. A demon screamed and threw a spear of black fire. Clark twisted in midair, shielding the child with his body. The fire hit him. Pain flared, real pain. His teeth clenched, but he kept moving. He placed the child on a safe ledge behind a rock. Then he went back down like a red and blue meteor, controlled, precise. He didn't slam into the ground. He landed light. The masked figure watched, delighted. "You felt that," it said. "Magic." Clark didn't answer. He grabbed two demons by their throats, lifted them, and threw them into the ravine wall so hard the stone cracked. He didn't kill them. He knocked them out, or as close as demons got to it. A third demon lunged. Clark sidestepped and chopped the demon's wrist. The clawed hand went numb and the demon's weapon dropped. Clark kicked the weapon away. More black fire came. Clark moved faster. He didn't let them cast in peace. He was behind one, then above another, then between two. The demons began to panic. They weren't used to prey that didn't fear them. But the masked figure was not panicking. It was studying, watching how Clark chose, always saving first, always holding back, always refusing to kill, even when the enemy deserved it. The masked figure raised one hand. A spell circle appeared, larger than before. Chains of light snapped out, not aimed at Clark's arms this time, but aimed at the ground around the captives. The chains wrapped the captives, lifted them slightly, and held them like puppets. Clark froze. The masked figure's voice softened, almost kind. "Come," it said. "Hit me. Use your strength." Clark stared at the captives, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling in the magic grip. If he rushed the figure and the spell reacted, people would die. Clark's hands clenched. The masked figure smiled. "That's it," it whispered. "That's your weakness." Clark shut his eyes for half a second and listened again. He searched for the focus, the anchor, the point where the spell was being held. He found it. Not in the air, in the masked figure's ring. A tiny object, shining with power. Clark opened his eyes. He moved so fast that the demons didn't even see him start. He didn't punch. He reached. His fingers closed around the masked figure's hand, and he twisted the ring off with one clean motion. The spell circle flickered. The chains loosened. The captives dropped, coughing, alive. Clark snapped the ring in his palm. It shattered with a sharp crack and a burst of light. The masked figure's head tilted like it was impressed. "So," it said quietly, "you learn." Clark stepped forward, voice low. "Who are you?" The figure laughed. Then the demons threw smoke and shadow into the ravine, thick and foul. Clark lunged forward, but the figure was already gone. Teleportation again? Clark stood in the ravine, breathing hard, pain still bright in his skin from the magic fire. The captives clung to each other, crying. Clark forced his voice gentle again. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe now." But inside, his mind was cold and focused. This was not random. This was organized. And whoever it was, they were getting bolder. That night, as Clark sat alone on a ridge and wrote his notes, he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't turn fast. He didn't need to. He already knew there was someone there. The heartbeat was strange, not human, old, slow, heavy, like a giant creature asleep under a lake. Clark stood and turned. A figure stood a few steps away, wearing armor that looked ancient and perfect. The armor held a sword. It looked like a knight from an old story. But the feeling coming off it was not a story. It was a warning. The armored figure spoke in a calm voice. "You are not from this world." Clark kept his hands open. "No." The figure's head tilted. "And yet you walk here as if you belong." "I walk here because people need help," Clark said. The figure stared at him, silent for a long moment. Then it said, "Help." The word sounded like it had been tested in the mouth and found suspicious. Clark lifted his chin slightly. "Who are you?" The armored figure did not answer. Instead it asked, "What are you?" Clark's jaw tightened. "A person." The figure took one step forward. The air shifted. Clark felt pressure, not like a spell he had seen before. This felt older, wilder, like the world itself was being told to bend. Clark's skin prickled. Magic again, but not the same kind. The figure spoke, voice still calm. "Outsiders have destroyed worlds." Clark held the figure's gaze. "I'm not here to destroy anything." The figure raised its sword slightly. "Words are easy," it said. Clark's stance changed. Not aggressive, but ready. "You want to fight?" Clark asked. The figure did not answer. It moved. Fast. Faster than any normal warrior. The sword flashed toward Clark's neck. Clark leaned back and let it pass so close, it cut the air by his skin. Clark stepped in and grabbed the blade. Steel that should have shattered in his grip did not. Clark's eyes narrowed. Interesting. The armored figure pulled, trying to yank the sword free. Clark didn't let go. The figure's other hand lifted, and the air cracked. A wave hit Clark's chest like invisible lightning. Clark flew backward. He dug his boots into the ground and stopped himself from crashing through the trees. He stared at the armored figure. That had hurt. Not like a punch. Like a rule. Clark straightened and stepped forward. "Stop," he said. "I don't want to hurt you." The armored figure's voice stayed cold. "Then leave." Clark shook his head. "I can't." The figure's sword flashed again. Clark moved. He was above it, then behind it, then in front of it, moving too fast for most eyes. But the armored figure tracked him anyway, turning with skill and something else. Experience that felt older than kingdoms. Clark tried a different approach. He reached for the armored figure's wrist, aiming to disarm without damage. His fingers touched armor, and a burst of power flared. Clark's hand jerked back like he had grabbed a burning wire. Clark's breath caught. The armored figure's voice lowered. "You feel it," it said. "Good." Clark's mind raced. This wasn't just armor. This was a puppet, he realized. A shell. The real being was somewhere else, watching through it, testing him. Clark stepped back, eyes sharp. "You're not here," he said. The armored figure paused. That pause was a confession. Clark continued, voice steady. "You're using this like a body, like a tool." The armored figure's sword lowered a fraction. "You are quick," it said. Clark swallowed the pain in his hand and kept his focus. "I'm not your enemy," Clark said. "But if you attack me while I'm trying to stop slavers and demons, then you're standing in the wrong place." The armored figure's head tilted again, as if the word slavers mattered. Clark pressed. "If you care about this world, then help me understand who is behind this." The armored figure was silent. Then it said, "There are things in this world that should not exist." Clark's eyes narrowed. "Like what?" The armored figure's voice became heavier. "A tomb that holds a kingdom, a power that grows in darkness." Clark's chest tightened. Sebas, a master, a hidden place. Clark put the pieces together, not fully, but enough to feel the shape. "You mean the ones watching me," Clark said. The armored figure lifted its sword again, but not to strike, more like a warning sign. "If you stay," it said, "you will force them to move, and when they move, nations will burn." Clark's voice softened, but it did not weaken. Nations are already burning, quietly, slowly, because people are afraid. The armored figure stared. Clark took one step forward, careful. "I won't rule," Clark said. "I won't conquer, but I also won't look away." For the first time, the armored figure's voice sounded almost uncertain. "Outsiders always say that," it said. Clark's eyes held steady. "Then watch me." The air shifted again. The armored figure's body began to shimmer. like it was losing its hold on reality. Before it faded, it spoke one last time. "If you seek the tomb," it said, "be ready for a mind that does not fight fair." Then the armor vanished. Clark stood alone under the night sky, wind pulling at his cloak. He felt the pain in his hand from that strange power. He felt the bruised ache in his chest. And he felt something else. A line had been drawn. Not by him, by the world. Clark looked down at his notes, at the names, the patterns, the whispers about demons and noble rings and a hidden kingdom under the earth. He folded the paper carefully and tucked it away like it was a shield. Then he looked toward the horizon. He did not know what Nazarick was yet. He did not know who Ainz Ooal Gown was. But he knew this much. Someone was using fear like a weapon. And now they had noticed him for real. Clark took a slow breath. "Okay," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "Then I'll make them come into the light." 3 weeks changed the shape of the world around Erentil. Not because the walls moved, because people did. They looked up more. They listened more. They spoke in smaller circles, and they stopped trusting that the strong would always win. Clark made himself a routine because he needed one. At sunrise, he checked the roads. He found carts stuck in mud and pushed them free with one hand, acting like it was normal. He found children chasing stray goats and walked them back to their mothers. He found a broken bridge and carried stones into place until it held again. He did not fly over the city every hour. He learned that even a shadow in the sky could start a riot. So he walked, he talked, and he wrote. Every night, he sat at the same table in the same inn and scratched words onto cheap paper with a borrowed quill. His handwriting was neat because he had practiced it for years. Here, it looked like a magic trick. Names, places, dates, witnesses. When he didn't have a date, he wrote, "After the Harvest Festival," or 2 days before the wolf attacks. It bothered him, but it was better than nothing. The innkeeper watched him one night and finally asked, "Why do you keep doing that?" Clark didn't look up from the page, because if nobody writes it down, the truth disappears. The innkeeper blinked. "Truth disappears anyway." Clark paused, then nodded once. "Then I'll keep writing anyway." That became a thing. A few adventurers started stopping by his table. At first, they didn't sit. They just hovered like they were afraid the chair might bite them. One of them, a short man with a scar across his lip, slid a folded piece of paper onto the table. Clark opened it and found a list of places where people had gone missing. "Where did you get this?" Clark asked. The man shrugged. "I asked around." Clark's eyes sharpened. "Who told you?" The man frowned. "Why does that matter?" Clark tapped the paper with his finger. "Because if I use this, and it's wrong, someone innocent gets blamed." "So, who told you?" The man stared like Clark was speaking another language. Then he groaned. "Fine. A guard at the east gate, and an old woman who sells herbs. Happy?" Clark nodded, satisfied. "Yes, that helps." The man walked away muttering, "This guy and his sources." Clark almost smiled. Almost, because every name on the list felt like a weight. He didn't only chase monsters anymore. He chased patterns. And the pattern kept pointing toward the same ugly truths. People were being sold, people were being used, and fear was being managed like a business. Sometimes Clark stopped it with his hands. More often, he stopped it by showing up at the wrong moment, hearing the wrong conversation, and making sure the right person lived long enough to tell the story. That was the new war, and he could feel the other players adjusting. The slain theocracy stopped trying to grab him in public. They went quiet. That scared him more. And somewhere in the background, the tomb the armored puppet had warned about stayed like a shadow in Clark's mind. The hidden kingdom under the earth. The Master Sebas would not name. Clark still didn't know the word Nazarick, but he could feel the attention, like a cold eye on the back of his neck. One afternoon, when the sun was low and the roads were long, Sebas found him again. Clark was standing beside a river, looking at the wreck of a small boat. A family had tried to cross during a storm. Clark had pulled them out, but the father had almost drowned. The father lay on the bank now, coughing and shaking. Sebas approached with careful steps. "Clark Dono," he said, Clark didn't turn right away. He listened to Sebas's heartbeat, steady, controlled. "What is it?" Clark asked. Sebas's tone was respectful. "My master wishes to speak with you." Clark turned then, eyes sharp. "Your master?" Sebas bowed. "Yes." Clark's jaw tightened. "Name?" Sebas held the silence again. Clark looked back at the family. The mother was wrapping her children in blankets. The father was alive. Barely, but alive. Clark had learned something important in this world. If someone refused to name themselves, it usually meant they held power that didn't want daylight. He faced Sebas again. "Where?" "A neutral place," Sebas said quickly, as if he expected that question. "Old ruins, a day's walk from the city. No civilians, no crowds." "And why would I go?" Clark asked. Sebas met his eyes. "Because my master knows who has been testing you." Clark's chest tightened. "The demons." Sebas nodded. "And the ones who tried to bind you." Clark thought of the chains of light, the blood on his cheek. The way the masked demons had smiled like this was entertainment. Clark spoke slowly. "If this is a trap—" "It is not," Sebas said, and for the first time his voice carried a hint of urgency. "I cannot promise you safety from the world, but I can promise this meeting is not an ambush." Clark stared. Sebas added, softer, "My master is cautious, like you." That sounded wrong. It also sounded honest. Clark took a breath. "When?" "Tomorrow," Sebas said. "At dusk." Clark looked away toward the trees. He could fly there in minutes, but he didn't say that. "Tell your master," Clark said. "I'll come, but I set the rules." Sebas's eyes flicked up. "Rules?" Clark's voice stayed calm. "No civilians, no hostages, no tests. If anyone tries to use innocent people to control me again, the meeting ends." Sebas bowed deeper. "Understood." As Sebas turned to leave, Clark called after him. "One more thing," Clark said. Sebas paused. Clark's eyes narrowed. "If your master is behind the demons, I'll find out." Sebas didn't look back. "So will I," he said quietly. And then he was gone down the path, moving like a man who did not want to be followed. Clark watched him until the trees swallowed him. Then Clark looked down at his notes. He added a new line. "Meeting. Unknown master. Dusk. Ruins." He set the quill down, and he finally let himself feel the truth he had been avoiding. This wasn't just about saving people anymore. This was about stopping a power that thought fear was normal, and Clark was about to walk into its shadow on purpose. Ein Zuulgaun did not like meetings. Meetings meant uncertainty. Uncertainty meant risk, and risk was the one thing he could not afford. Still, he sat in a small chamber far from the main halls of Nazarick, away from where his guardians might explode into arguments. The room was quiet and plain by Nazarick standards. No grand statues, no banners, just stone, a table, and a mirror for scrying. Demiurge stood to one side. Albedo stood to the other. Sebas had already reported. "The man accepted," Ein said. Albedo's wings twitched, barely contained. "Ein Sama, allow me to accompany you." Demiurge's smile was thin. "I agree. We should be prepared." Ains tapped the table once. "I will bring protection," he said, "but not you." Albedo's eyes widened. "Why not?" "Because," Ains replied, voice calm and heavy. "If you see him and decide you dislike him, you will ruin the meeting." Albedo's face tightened like a blade. Demiurge's eyes gleamed with quiet amusement, but he stayed silent. Ains continued, "Sebas will come. And Pandora's actor." Demiurge bowed. "A wise choice." Albedo's voice went colder. "And what do we offer him?" Ains leaned back. He thought of the demon in the square. That was not supposed to happen like that. Demiurge had been active lately. He thought of the slain theocracy. If they controlled the man in blue, the world would tilt. Even Nazarick could be threatened by a weapon like that, used recklessly. "We offer him clarity," Ains said, "and a boundary." Demiurge tilted his head. "A boundary?" Ains's voice did not change. He wants to protect. We want stability. If we can make him avoid Nazarick, we gain time. If we can make him understand the true enemy trying to chain him, we gain leverage. Albedo leaned forward slightly. And if he refuses? Ains's mind flashed through options. Time stop, reality warping spells, world-class items. All of it existed. None of it felt safe. Not yet. Ains's voice stayed steady. Then we learn more. Demiurge's smile sharpened. And if he threatens Nazarick? Ains's jaw tightened in a way his skull could not show. Then, he said, we respond. Albedo's eyes softened with loyalty at that. But Ains was not thinking about loyalty. He was thinking about how the man in blue kept refusing to kill. How he kept asking for records. How he kept building trust. Ains hated how dangerous that kind of power was. And he hated how a small part of him respected it. The ruins were older than the road. Broken stone columns stuck out of the ground like ribs. Moss-covered carved symbols that no one living remembered. Clark arrived early. He didn't want to be late in a place like this. The air was still. No birds. No insects. That was the first bad sign. Clark stood in the open and waited. Cloak off. Cape visible. If this meeting was a test, he wouldn't hide. Dusk came. The temperature dropped. Then the air changed. Not wind. Not weather. Magic. A dark circle formed on the ground like a shadow that had been cut into a perfect shape. 3 figures rose out of it as if the earth had opened and offered them up. Clark's senses screamed a warning before his eyes finished seeing them. The first was Seba's, calm and familiar. The second was a man in a strange outfit, dramatic in posture, with a smile that looked a bit too rehearsed. And the third? The third was not a man. It was a skeleton in a robe, a crown of gold, a presence that felt like a storm held inside a box. Clark did not step back, but his body went still, the way it did when he stood near something that could change the world. The skeleton spoke. Its voice was deep and controlled, like the voice of someone used to being obeyed. "Clark," it said. "Thank you for coming." Clark stared. He could hear no heartbeat, no breathing. This thing was not alive. Clark's eyes narrowed, but his voice stayed steady. "You're Sebas's master." The skeleton nodded slightly. "Yes, you may call me Ains." Clark held the name in his mind. Ains. No title, no kingdom name. That was deliberate. Clark took a slow breath. "Why are you watching me?" Ains lifted a bony hand gently, palm outward, like a sign of peace. "Because you are an anomaly," Ains said. "You do not belong in this world, yet you act upon it." Clark's mouth tightened. People were being hurt. "I stopped it." Ains nodded. "Yes, and you did so without killing. That is rare." Clark didn't take the bait. "Were you behind the demon in the square?" Ains paused. "Just a fraction. Small." But Clark noticed. "I was not," Ains said. Clark watched him. "Then who was?" Ains's head tilted, slow. "A faction that fears outsiders. They attempted to bind you. They will attempt again." Clark's eyes sharpened. "Slain theocracy." Ains didn't react, but the air around him felt colder. "So you have learned," Ains said. Clark took a step forward. "Careful. Tell me what you know." Ains gestured toward a broken column. "Then we speak." Clark did not sit. Neither did Ains. They stood across from each other in the ruins, with Sebas and the dramatic man behind Ains like shadows. Ains spoke calmly. "The slain theocracy believes they must protect humanity at any cost. They see you as a weapon or a threat. They have rare tools. Some can control even powerful beings." Clark's jaw tightened. "Mind control." Ains nodded once. "Yes." Clark's fists clenched, then relaxed. "And what do you want?" Ains's voice stayed level. "Stability." Clark almost laughed, but he didn't. That's a big word for a hidden master in a tomb. The dramatic man behind Ains made a soft sound, like he wanted to react, but held it in. Ains's empty eyes stayed fixed on Clark. "You have questions. So do I." You call yourself Clark. Is that your true name? Clark hesitated. Then he made a choice. Truth was his weapon. Even here. My name is Clark Kent, he said. But it isn't my first name. Ain's head tilted slightly. Clark continued, slow and clear, like he was telling a child something important. I'm not from this world. I was born on another planet. My people called me Kal-El. The air went still. Sebes did not move. The dramatic man's eyes widened in clear delight, like he had been waiting for a reveal like this his whole life. Ain's voice stayed calm, but something in it sharpened. An alien. Clark nodded. Yes. Ain's asked, and the name the villagers use? Clark looked down at the symbol on his chest. In my world, he said, people call me Superman. The word hung in the air like a hammer. Ain's repeated it softly. Superman. Clark met his gaze. I'm not a god. I'm not here to rule. I'm here to help. Ain's was silent for a moment. Then he spoke. If your goal is to help, Ain said, then you will clash with this world, and you will clash with me. Clark didn't blink. Then we should be clear now. Ains lifted his hand again. A thin glow formed in the air, shaping into a magic circle. Clark tensed, but did not strike. Ain said, this is a simple contract. A boundary spell. It prevents violence during this meeting. It will not bind your mind. It will not harm you. Clark watched the glow. He could feel the rule inside it. He understood enough now to know magic could lie with a pretty shape. He looked at Sebes. Sebes met his eyes and gave the smallest nod. Clark made his choice. Do it, Clark said. The glow expanded once, like a wave, then settled. Clark felt a gentle pressure, like a line he could not cross. Ain's lowered his hand. Good, Ain said. Now, I offer you this. Do not seek my home. Do not interfere with my domain. In return, I will not target you. I will also provide you information on the theocracy's tools, so you may defend yourself. Clark stared. That's your offer. Stay out of your way. Ain's voice stayed smooth. And prevent war. Clark took a step closer, stopping at the invisible line. My offer is simple too, Clark said. Stop using people as pieces. Stop summoning demons into cities. Stop slavery. Stop the fear games. Ain's was quiet. Then he said, You assume I am responsible. Clark's eyes hardened. You're standing in the shadow of a power big enough to do it. That makes you responsible for what happens under that shadow. Ain's didn't argue right away. And in that silence, Clark felt something. Not guilt. Calculation. Ain spoke. If I told you I could end certain crimes in a region instantly, by force, would you accept it? Clark answered fast. No. Ain's tilted his head. Why? Because force without accountability becomes tyranny, Clark said. People learn to obey, not to live. The dramatic man behind Ain's looked like he wanted to clap. Ain's ignored him. You are consistent, Ain said. That is useful. It is also dangerous. Clark's voice softened. You're not wrong. For a moment, it almost felt like a conversation between two leaders who didn't want to be enemies. Then the world snapped. A burst of light cracked the air at the edge of the ruins. Clark felt the contract line shudder. A voice shouted from the dark, sharp and commanding. Now. Black figures appeared on the broken stones like shadows given bodies. Masks. Perfect movement. The black scripture. Ain's head turned slowly. Clark's muscles tensed. And the air filled with magic again, hard, tight, aimed like a net. Chains of light shot toward Clark from 3 directions. Clark moved. But the chains weren't aimed at his arms this time. They aimed at his mind. A pressure slammed into Clark's head like a door trying to close on his thoughts. He staggered 1 step. His vision flashed white. A command tried to form inside him. Kneel. Obey. Come. Clark gritted his teeth. He felt the urge like a Chuja hand inside his skull. He grabbed the edge of a broken column to steady himself. No. He focused on something real. The sound of a child's breathing in Carne Village. The way the father coughed water by the river. The simple truth he kept repeating. I help. The pressure squeezed harder. Ainz's voice cut through the chaos, calm and cold. So, Ainz said, you attack here. The black scripture leader stepped forward, holding a small item that glowed like a trapped star. By the will of the theocracy, the leader said, you will be taken. Clark's eyes narrowed. His voice came out rough but clear. Not happening. He pushed against the mental pressure with sheer stubborn focus. The chains flickered. He moved fast, faster than the spellcasters expected, snatching the glowing item from the leader's hand. Pain flared in his skull again, like the item was biting him. He didn't crush it. He didn't know what it was. So he did the safest thing he could think of. He threw it straight up. Not into the crowd. Not into the trees. Up into the empty sky. It became a bright dot and vanished into the clouds. The mental pressure eased slightly. Clark sucked in a breath like a drowning man getting air. Ainz's voice remained calm. Pandora's actor, Ainz said, seal the area. The dramatic man bowed and snapped his fingers. A thin barrier formed around the ruins like a clear wall. It didn't shine much. It just existed. The black scripture fighters slammed into it when they tried to retreat. Teleportation spells flashed and failed. Their eyes widened. Delayed teleportation, Clark heard one of them hiss. Clark's head turned. Ainz had set a trap inside the trap. Clark's mind raced. He didn't like being used as bait, but right now civilians weren't here, and these people had tried to chain him like a thing. He made a choice. He would end this clean. Clark moved like lightning through the ruins. He didn't punch through chests. He didn't tear limbs. He disarmed. He redirected. He hit pressure points with control that looked impossible at this speed. One fighter tried to cast a fire spell at Clark's face. Clark was already behind him, tapping the back of his neck. The fighter dropped unconscious. Another tried to use a hostage tactic, rushing toward Sebas, thinking Sebas was human. Sebas didn't move. Sebas lifted one hand and stopped the attacker mid-step with a single strike that looked gentle. The attacker flew backward and didn't stand again. Clark noticed that. He filed it away. Ainz raised a hand. A circle of black light formed under three fighters at once. They sank into it up to their knees, like the ground turned to mud. They struggled, panicked. Ainz's voice was calm. Enough. Clark glanced at Ainz. Ainz could have killed them all right now. Clark could feel that. The air around Ainz was full of options. Instead, Ainz used control. Containment. Information. The black scripture leader, the same masked warrior from before, forced his body forward through sheer will and tried to reach for another item. Clark was there first. Clark grabbed the warrior's wrist and held it. The warrior strained like a cornered animal. You don't understand, the warrior hissed. If we don't take you, your kind will destroy us. Clark's voice lowered. My kind? The warrior's eyes burned. Outsiders. Players. Monsters. Gods. Clark's jaw tightened. I'm not here to destroy you. The warrior spat blood. That's what they all say. Clark stared at him for a beat, then made his choice. He knocked the warrior out with one clean hit. No anger. No cruelty. Just an end. The barrier held. The remaining fighters struggled, then stilled as Ainz's spells locked them down. Silence returned to the ruins. Clark's breathing slowed. His head still ached from the attempted mind control. He pressed his palm briefly to his temple, then dropped it. Ainz looked at him. The contract line still shimmered faintly, like it was trying to remember the rules it had set. Ainz spoke first. They came for you, Ainz said, and they interrupted my offer. Clark's eyes narrowed. You knew they might. Ainz didn't deny it. It was likely. Clark's voice tightened. So I was bait. Ainz's tone stayed even. You were a target. I placed myself near the target to observe the method. Clark stared at him, and something in his chest flared hot. Not fear. Anger. But he kept it controlled. People aren't tools, Clark said, voice low. Ainz answered, and for a moment it sounded almost honest. In my world, Ainz said, everything is a tool, or it becomes a victim. Clark stepped closer to the invisible line again. "I'm not letting this world teach me that," Clark said. Ainz held still. "Then you will suffer." Clark's eyes sharpened. "Then I'll suffer." Ainz was silent. Then he lifted a hand and made the barrier fade. The black-clad bodies remained, bound and unconscious. Ainz said, "You saw their weakness. Magic affects you, but you resisted the control. Interesting." Clark's mouth went thin. "Your information was real." Ainz nodded. "Yes." Clark looked down at the bound fighters. "What will you do with them?" Clark asked. Ainz's voice did not change. "They attacked us. They will not leave without consequence." Clark's gaze hardened. "No executions." Albedo wasn't here, but Clark could almost feel her anger anyway. Ainz tilted his head. "You would protect those who tried to enslave your mind?" Clark answered simply, "I protect rules. If I let you kill them because it's easy, I become part of the same fear machine." Ainz stared at him. Then Ainz spoke a line that surprised Clark. "You are stubborn," Ainz said, "and inconvenient." Clark didn't smile. "I've heard." Ainz turned slightly, as if looking past Clark at the sky. "I will not promise you a gentle world," Ainz said, "but I will adjust. For now." Clark's eyes narrowed. "Adjust what?" Ainz paused. "The public games, the open chaos, the demon displays." Clark felt his stomach tighten. So Ainz had some hand in the games, even if he wasn't admitting it directly. Clark's voice went colder. "Stop them completely." Ainz's tone stayed measured. "You ask for a change of nature." Clark stepped forward again, as far as the invisible line allowed. "Then start anyway." Ainz didn't flinch. "You will not enter my home," Ainz said. Clark held his gaze. "And you will not hurt civilians. Not directly, not through proxies, not through tests." Ainz's empty eyes stayed on Clark. At last, he nodded once. "A temporary understanding," Ainz said. "Not friendship, not alliance." Clark nodded back. "Good, because I'm not joining you." Ainz tilted his head. "I did not ask you to join. I asked you to stay away." Clark's jaw tightened. "Then here's the truth. I will stay away from your home unless I have proof you are hurting people." Ainz's presence sharpened like a blade pulled halfway out of a sheath. Clark didn't back down. "If you keep your side clean," Clark said, "I won't come knocking." Ainz was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. "That is acceptable," Ainz said, and the word sounded like it hurt. Clark let out a slow breath. The meeting had not ended in a handshake. It had ended in a fence built out of caution. That was still something. Clark looked toward the dark trees beyond the ruins. He could feel it again. Eyes. Ancient eyes. Watching from far away. The armored puppet hadn't been here, but Clark knew the real being had noticed. This world was full of watchers. Now Clark was one of them too. Ainz turned to leave, shadows gathering under his feet again. Before he stepped into them, Clark spoke. "One more thing," Clark said. Ainz paused. Clark's voice softened, just a little. "If you really want stability, then stop teaching the world that fear is the only language." Ainz didn't answer right away. Then he said, quiet and flat, "Fear is efficient." Clark's eyes hardened. "So is hope." Ainz's head tilted as if he didn't like the word. Then he vanished with Seba's and Pandora's actor into the dark circle, leaving Clark alone with unconscious holy assassins and the smell of broken magic in the air. Clark stared at the sky. He didn't feel victory. He felt a new kind of tired, but he also felt something clear. He had drawn his line, and the biggest powers in this world had seen it. A week later, a strange thing happened in Erantel. On the main notice wall near the Adventurers Guild, a new board appeared. It wasn't fancy, just wood and nails. At the top, someone had written in clear letters, "Statements." Below that, name, place, what happened, who saw it. People stared at it like it was a joke. Then a woman came, shaking, and pinned a small paper to it. "My brother went missing on the North Road," it said. "He had a scar on his chin. He carried herbs. 2 men in gray cloaks took him. I saw their cart. Clark stood nearby, arms crossed, cloak on, cape hidden, watching. An adventurer walked up and squinted at the paper. "Why write this?" the adventurer asked, suspicious. Clark answered, "Simple. So nobody can say it didn't happen." The adventurer frowned. "And what good does that do?" Clark looked at the board. "It makes lies harder." The adventurer snorted. "You think paper stops monsters?" Clark's eyes stayed calm. "No, but it helps us find them." People began bringing small scraps of truth. Slowly, cautiously, like they were testing if hope was safe. Some nobles were angry about it. Guards grumbled. The guildmaster pretended he didn't care while still letting the board stay. And Clark kept writing. Not because he believed paper alone could fix this world. Because he believed truth was the start of every fix. Far away, in halls filled with holy symbols, the slain theocracy read reports with pale faces. Their best tools had failed to take him. They had learned something worse. He could resist, and he was not alone in the shadows. Deep underground, Ainz sat in his plain chamber again. Demiurge spoke carefully. "The demon operations can be reduced," Demiurge said, "if that is your will." Ainz's skull face did not change, but his voice turned colder. "It is my will," Ainz said. Demiurge smiled politely. "As you command." Albedo's wings twitched with anger. "Ainz Sama, why restrain ourselves because of him?" Ainz's voice stayed calm. "Because if we clash openly, the world becomes a battlefield, and a battlefield attracts other predators." He did not say the words Platinum Dragon Lord. He did not need to. Sebes bowed slightly, relief hidden behind perfect manners. Ainz looked into the scrying mirror. Clark stood beside that board in Tel, watching people pin scraps of truth like fragile armor. Ainz's mind tightened. That, Ainz thought, is a different kind of threat. Not because it could destroy Nazarick in a day. Because it could change what people accepted. And that was slower. Harder to stop. Later, in a small village that had once been a smoking ruin, Clark carried a stack of wooden beams on his shoulder like they were sticks. The village was rebuilding a schoolhouse. It wasn't called that. They called it a learning room. But it was the same idea. Children watched him with wide eyes as he set the beams in place with careful precision. One boy pointed at Clark's chest where the S showed beneath his open cloak. "What does that mean?" the boy asked. Clark paused and crouched so he was eye level. "It's a symbol," Clark said. "A magic symbol?" the boy asked, hopeful and scared at the same time. Clark smiled a little. "Not magic. It means hope." The boy frowned like he was trying to understand a big word. "Hope," the boy repeated. A girl beside him asked, "Will you leave?" Clark's smile faded, not into sadness, but into honesty. "I don't know," he said. The girl's eyes widened. "Then why are you here?" Clark took a breath. He looked around the village. He saw new roofs, new doors, people who still flinched at loud sounds, but who were rebuilding anyway. He saw a world that had taught itself to expect the worst, and he saw small cracks in that lesson. "I'm here," Clark said, "because when you're scared, someone should show up." The girl stared, then nodded once like that answer was enough. A man approached from the side. An elder this time. He held a rolled-up piece of paper like it was something precious. "We wrote what happened," the elder said, voice careful. "Like you said." Clark's eyes softened. The elder handed him the paper. It was messy, spelling wrong, dates unclear. But it had names. It had witnesses. It had truth. Clark took it like it mattered. Because it did. "Thank you," Clark said. The elder hesitated. "Will this stop them?" Clark looked at the paper, then at the village. "It helps," he said, "and I'll keep stopping them too." That night, Clark sat alone outside the half-finished schoolhouse with a quill and more parchment. He wrote a report like he used to. Clean, simple, honest. He didn't have a newspaper to print it in, so he kept it anyway. A record. A promise. Behind him, a curtain hung from a wooden frame, used to block wind from the sleeping children inside. Clark stood, glanced around, and walked behind the curtain. He paused. A thin smile tugged at his mouth. This was the closest thing to a phone booth he had found in weeks. He changed into his suit anyway, stepping out with the cape settling behind him. Somewhere above, the stars were still wrong, but they still shone. Clark lifted off quietly and hovered over the village, high enough that he was only a speck against the night. He listened. He heard crickets. He heard breathing. He heard no screaming. For now, far away, in places he couldn't see, minds planned. Monsters waited. Holy men sharpened their fear into weapons. An ancient dragon watched from behind a mask. And deep underground, a king made of bone calculated what hope might cost him. Clark looked at the horizon. He didn't pretend he could fix this world in a week. He didn't pretend the darkness would stop because he asked nicely. He only made the choice he always made. He stayed. Not as a ruler. Not as a god. As a guardian who kept showing up again and again until the world learned a new habit. A simple one. That help could arrive,